la la. I know, getting in on that ooh la la stuff. Hey, I was reading an abbreviated article by Nicholas Kristof and Cheryl Wooden from a book that they co-authored. They're married, titled Half the City, which is a story about how women around the world are empowered and are able to move beyond whatever that particular culture and society says women are and are supposed to be. And he wrote the book, but in 1990, he had written an article about a guy who gave a $100 gift after reading it in the newspaper about the poverty of a village in central China, and how it was just dirt poor, and the young girls could not even go to kindergarten unless they were able, a family could get together $13 per year to give to the school district to get their girls into school. And most of them could not afford to do that, so as a result, a lot of women in that part of that province in central China, in the Dubai Mountains, was pretty rough. So they profiled one family, and when they went into to interview the one family, they had hardly any furniture, and the most prominent piece of furniture in the living room was a casket made out of wood. And they were asking about that. The casket was for the great aunt, who happened to be sitting on it and was there and doing very nicely. Thank you very much. And she said, well, I don't need it. I thought I did, but I don't now. I'm actually doing pretty well. So they've adapted and used the casket. Well, think about it, right? End table, coffee table, a regular seat. You can do many things with a casket other than lay in it. And that's what they found that village in that household doing. Interestingly enough, this guy read the article and sent $100 to Nicholas Kristof. But what he didn't know is that the bank, Morgan Guarantee Trust Company, added some zeros quite by accident. And they sent $10,000 to that particular village in central China. And with that, they were able to build a school, and they were able to have all of the girls in the village attend public school all the way through. The one family they were profiling had a young lady who went through junior high, high school, graduated the technical school for accounting, moved out of the village, got a job in accounting, and was able then to send money back to the family, who started to prosper because of her work. When they revisited that whole thing in 2009 and 10, found that the young lady was now working for an electronics firm in Taiwan, but in China, and was ready to break off and start her own company. And they found that in tracking the other young ladies in that village, most of them, not all, but most of them had made it in terms of getting a degree, having decent jobs, and the whole shooting match. Now, Kristof was quite amused by this because at that time, Morgan Guarantee found out the error they had made. I don't know why so long, but Kristof went and interviewed one of the vice presidents, who said, are you going to request that the village return that $9,900 over gift? And they decided not to, that it would not look very good for them to do that. So they then gave that as a donation in there. But in any case, it's funny how when you look at humanity in a certain way, you just want to help where you can. You just want to help out wherever you can, whether it be for 100 or an accidental 10,000. Either way, it's a good working example of how God is active and busy in the world, under the surface, under the radar, just doing those good and wonderful kinds of things through people. Now, the congregation in Colossae that Paul was writing to, our second reading, they were having identity issues, right? Just like we do today, you know. Who am I? Where do I belong? What's the meaning of life? The world seems to not be getting a whole lot better, and do I want to get invested more in my local communities, or do I just want to sort of back off? Do I want to really get invested in national stuff, or do I just want to mind my business? You know, identity is a real critical issue for all of us. Identity and belonging. And that was as true in Colossae in 54 AD as it is in our time. What was happening in Colossae, of course, was not significantly different because they were on the border between two warring nations, Parthia and Rome. And at one time, Parthia would win, so they would become Parthians. That would be their identity for a while. Then Rome would win, and Rome would reinstitute their rules and regulations, so they'd become Romans for a while. They also had their own ethnic identities, whatever that would be. And so they were just looking at all of this and saying, you know, who I am in the world just really is pretty insignificant and doesn't matter too awful much. And as a result, what they did, and you will be familiar with this because this hit the United States and all around the world about 10 years ago, angels, right? There were a gazillion books on angels. All kinds of trinkets and jewelry and the whole shooting match. And so the congregation in Colossae said, you know, life is so crazy, we have so little impact on it, that God could not possibly have meant to send his son Jesus into such a stupid world as we have right now and die for it, that he had to have been an angelic being. There were even rumors in that day that when Jesus walked, he didn't leave any footprints, which is to emphasize his spiritual side, you know, rather than his physical or corporeal bodily functions. So they did all kinds of things with that to try to bow out emotionally and spiritually as much as they were capable of doing. And what Paul did then was to come back in and say, hey, just stop a second here. And this is where you picked up on it last week, Miss May. Didn't know you did that, did you? Yes, you did. He said, who created everything? That's the place where you start with your faith. Who created it? That answer will determine in large part how you will live in this world. If God created it all through his word, Jesus, and then the Spirit, being creative and chaotic and bringing order out of chaos, did it through the days of creation, that then is the pattern which will occur and continue throughout world history. So we live in a time in which God created the world and was pleased with it in its fundamentals, that by his word he created all things and planted his word in everything and everybody for all time. And at the times and the intersections of the chaoticness of either your life or the world's life, that is where you will find in, with, and under, to use a phrase of Martin Luther, in, with, and under, the Spirit's presence will be there. You see? Yeah. See, now this could get chaotic, but it won't. Because the Spirit is in, with, and under. So we're not going to fret about it. The Colossians finally began to get that understanding of identity and belonging, to realize that they belong to a good world that God created. That sin, right, selfishness, greed, jealousy, all of envy, pride, all of those things, is destroyed and diminished. But because God is present through the Spirit in the chaos, he will bring a sense of order and purpose and place for Christian believers. And that you don't need to worry about angels and the heavenly places and all of that kind of stuff. You just got to worry and live your day now. Yeah, give me a second here. That spark was a spark. I thought it was more like fireworks from where I was standing. The question of identity and belonging is paramount. And you know that in our world, right? I mean, I went with my wife for the first time ever to that body, beautiful body, and beyond beauty. What is it called? Bed Bath and Beyond, that one, Bed Bath and Beyond. I didn't see perfume. Oh my Lord, I was in heaven. I thought I had died and gone to heaven. Ooh la la. It had gadgets. It had zillions of gadgets I had never seen. I knew they existed. And they were in all kinds of manly looking colors. Black and gray and gunmetal and No, I'm not cooking. I just bought stuff. Not to do anything with it, understand. And they also had sections and sections of things as seen on TV. I thought my heart would just stop right then and there. It was wonderful. I ran up that bill and had a good time, and I have been uninvited to not go there again. And I probably won't. I'm finding myself too weak to control myself. But the interesting thing, I actually did have to go back to take something back. Somebody had pulled out the 2 pillowcases out of a sheet set. Why not? You get fevery. It's ridiculous. So I went back and, the one wonderful thing, she asked me, do you want to belong? to Bed Bath and Beauty Beyond. And I said, yes. And then I looked at the little card she was going to give me to be beautiful beyond all beauty and thought I'd better not do that. So I didn't. But I know every store you go for coffee, and they're going to give you a card so that you can belong to them. God bless them. And you can get a credit card. I've wanted a credit card for years. And you get 2% back on everything you purchase. So I can belong. That's all. I just want to belong. And the offers are there to belong and to have an identity. And this is how our culture works. Paul calls it, by the way, when you read, the translation we have for the second reading is sort of like boring and doesn't really get to the heart of it very good. But he calls things in our world the elemental spirits, or the elemental things of our time. And that's what he means. The invitations to identity are present everywhere at all times in all kinds of ways. And what happens with that is that we can get deterred in the way of faith by getting sidetracked into belonging to things which don't have any eternal value. I don't think St. Peter's going to be impressed if I whip out my credit cards and I say I belong to Beyond Beautiful and I get 2% back on my journey to heaven. And that kind of, you know what I mean? It's just not going to happen. But what Paul says is, listen, if you're going to have an identity as a person of faith, start on the planet on which you walk. And look around there and see then where Christ as Word has spoken and is present. Paul makes a very strong point in Colossae, in that letter, that Christ is present everywhere and in everything which is created. And so then, of course, that which you create also has to have some kind of meaning and value for the human race also. This guy who made that $100 gift that turned into a $10,000 gift, he was doing that out of just plain old goodwill to try to help one girl for like 5 years go to school. And the gift ended up being magnified tremendously by a bank error who very graciously forgave that error in themselves and allowed it to stand. And as a result, you have people maturing and growing and in significant places of business. Think about that, how God works in, with, and underneath that chaotic mess of that $100 turned into a $10,000 you now have a whole mess of women, Chinese, with whom we have tremendous issues, sometimes conflicts, all of a sudden beholden and thankful to an American citizen and an American-based bank for an education and the opportunity to start a new business. You see how God works underneath? Out of the chaos, the Spirit brings order. And in the order, you can see God's purposes. But that calls for eyes of faith. And that's what Paul is talking about. You who live in Colossae have been given the eyes of faith to see God at work in the world in which you live.